You open the ER bill, $3,200 for a single dog bite, and assume that that's the entire price tag. Well, settle on that number and you could very well be forfeiting a 5 or even 6-figure amount for future surgeries, wage losses, and scarring damages that Maryland law says that you are entitled to. Stay right here and I will break down the exact factors that turn a small bite into a life-changing payout so that you walk into negotiations armed with real numbers and not guesses. First, let's understand the financial impact of your dog bite injury. If you have been bitten by a dog in Maryland, one of the first questions that comes to mind is naturally about compensation. What is my case actually worth? It's a fair question, and honestly, it's one that deserves a thorough answer because the financial impact of a dog bite can be far more significant than most people really understand. Hello, my name is Bobby Zirkin. I've been handling personal injury cases and dog bite cases in Maryland for over 25 years. I'm a former member of the Maryland House of Delegates and the Maryland State Senate. I can tell you that dog bite cases often surprise people with their complexity and their potential value. The truth is that there is no simple calculator that spits out a number. Anybody that tells you that is selling you something. Every case is unique, shaped by specific circumstances, specific injuries, and specific impacts on your life. Maryland used to follow what was called the one free bite rule. Basically what that was that if your dog hadn't bitten before, it was very difficult for the owner to be held responsible for the bite. And so you needed a prior attack or some evidence that there was viciousness that the victim could tie to the dog owner. That was very difficult for plaintiffs to prove in Maryland. And there is now new law, both statutory and case law, that determines dog bite liability. It is no longer the case in Maryland where there is this one free bite rule. In fact, owners of dogs can be held responsible under theories of both negligence and strict liability under various circumstances. It is very complicated. Under Maryland law, a dog owner can be held liable for injuries caused by their dog if they knew or should have known that the dog had dangerous propensities. This is codified in Maryland Code Section 3-1901, which makes it clear that owners and harborers of dogs are responsible when their knowledge of the dog's tendencies can be established. But here's what makes Maryland law interesting. We have strict liability for certain situations. So we kind of have a hybrid law. If a dog bites someone in a public place, or what is at large, the owner is automatically liable regardless of the dog's history. This means that you don't have to prove that the owner knew or should have known that the dog was dangerous in cases where the dog is running at large. The practical impact of this law is significant for case value. When liability is clear, we can focus on proving damages rather than fighting over whether the owner should be held responsible. And this impacts negotiations dramatically. This often leads to faster settlements and potentially higher compensation because the insurance company knows they can't win on liability. I've seen cases where this strict liability provision made the difference between a modest settlement and a substantial one. And when the other side knows they can't argue their way out of responsibility, they do tend to make settlement negotiations better and take them more seriously. So let's talk a little bit about the types of damages that you can recover. When we talk about the value of your case, you can recover several types of damages. And understanding these categories is pretty important. Medical expenses are typically the foundation of any dog bite claim and really most tort claims. This includes emergency room visits, surgical procedures, medications, physical therapy, and any ongoing treatment. What many people don't realize is that you can recover not just past medical expenses, but also future medical costs that are reasonably certain to occur. I had a client who suffered nerve damage from a pretty significant dog bite that required multiple surgeries over several years. The initial emergency room bill was only a couple of $1,000s, but the total medical damages far exceeded $50,000 when we factored in the reconstruction that was necessary, all of the physical therapy, and even some of the emotional therapy that was necessary. The key is to work with medical experts who can project not just what you need today, but but future treatment as well. Lost wages also represent a significant component to your damages. If your injuries prevent you from working, you're entitled to compensation for that lost income. This includes not just the time you were completely unable to work, but also any reduction in earning capacity. For example, if you're a carpenter and a dog bite damages your dominant hand, reducing your ability to perform fine motor tasks that impact your potential earnings, those are recoverable, not just what you have already lost, but also for the long term and things in the future. Pain and suffering damages are often the largest component of a dog bite settlement. They're also the most difficult to quantify. Maryland caps pain and suffering damages in dog bite cases and all torts. That cap right now stands at around $915,000. It goes up every year by about $15,000. But that's a substantial amount of money, especially when medical bills can be, just a few $1,000s. The key factors we consider for pain and suffering include the severity of the injury, the length of recovery, and any permanency, like permanent scarring or disfigurement, and the impact on your daily activities. Facial scarring, for instance, can dramatically increase the value of a case, especially for children, younger victims who will live with the scarring for decades. I've handled cases where the medical bills were modest, if not small, maybe just a few $1,000s, but the pain and suffering award was $50,000, $100,000, even $300,000-$400,000 because the bite left permanent scarring on a toddler's face, for example. The visible permanent nature of the injury drove the settlement value significantly higher. So let's talk a little bit about what factors increase a case value. Several factors can substantially increase the value of your dog bite case, and understanding these can help you assess whether your situation might warrant a higher settlement or a verdict if we end up going to trial. Permanent scarring or disfigurement, as we just talked about, is one of the most significant value drivers. When a dog bite leaves permanent mark, especially on visible areas like the face or the hands, arms, the compensation typically increases dramatically. Maryland courts recognize that scarring affects not just physical appearance, but also emotional well-being and social interaction. The age of the victim can play a critical role in valuation. Children and young adults with permanent scarring often receive higher settlement offers because they're going to live with the consequences for a longer period of time. I've seen cases where identical injuries resulted in settlements 3, 4, 5 times higher for a child compared to someone who's more elderly, simply because of the life expectancy difference. The location of the bite matters enormously. Facial injuries, as we've discussed, consistently generate higher settlements and judgments than bites to other parts of the body. This reflects both the visibility of facial scarring and the psychological impact of having facial disfigurement. Hand injuries can also lead to higher settlements, particularly if they affect your ability to work or perform daily activities. The circumstances of the attack can influence value as well. If the dog was known to be aggressive, if the owner violated leash laws, or if the attack was particularly vicious, these factors can increase both the likelihood of a higher settlement and the potential for a bigger jury verdict. Obviously, in rare cases, if it's a malicious act, where somebody sets the dog on somebody purposely, that can actually get what are called punitive damages. Those are rare in the state of Maryland, but we've had them before. Psychological trauma is increasingly recognized in dog bite cases. Many victims develop fear of dogs or other anxiety disorders following an attack, things like PTSD. When these conditions require treatment and affect your quality of life, they add substantial value to a case. The economic impact and lost earning capacity or lost wages can impact the value of a case, obviously, as well. Lost earning capacity can be one of the more valuable components of a case, particularly for severe injuries that affect or completely derail your ability to work. If you're in a profession that requires manual dexterity like surgery or dental work, skilled trades, things of that nature, a dog bite to your hands can be career-ending. I represented a dental hygienist who suffered nerve damage in her dominant hand from a dog bite. While her medical bills were not that high, they were about $10,000, $12,000. The impact on her career was worth over $300,000 because she could no longer perform the precise movements required for her profession. And then, of course, there was pain and suffering and things of that nature. For business owners, the impact can be very complex. If you're unable to work for an extended period of time your business may suffer or even fail, we can recover those damages for lost business income. Proving those damages definitely requires careful documentation, expert testimony. It's very complicated, but it is doable. The calculation of lost earning capacity involves looking at your age, your education, your work history, and the specific limitation caused by your injuries. We often work with what are called vocational rehabilitation specialists or experts who can assess how your injuries will affect your future earning potential. Insurance coverage also has an impact on settlement value. Most dog bite claims are covered by the dog owner's, homeowner's, or renter's insurance policy. The amount of available insurance coverage often becomes a practical ceiling on potential recovery, even if your damages exceed those policy limits. Standard homeowners policies typically include liability coverage ranging anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. Some policies exclude or try to exclude certain dog breeds, while others have specific provisions for dog bite claims. Those are interesting legal quandaries to deal with. Understanding the available coverage early in the case helps set realistic expectations for settlement value. When insurance coverage is limited relative to your damages, we may need to explore other sources of recovery. This could include the dog owner's personal assets, maybe umbrella policies or other additional insurance policies, or claims against other potentially responsible parties like landlords or property managers. I've seen cases where the initial insurance coverage seemed adequate, but as the full extent of the client's injuries became clear, we had to pursue additional or other sources of compensation. This is why early case evaluation is really important. It's important to understand the role of comparative negligence and contributory negligence in dealing with some dog bite cases. Maryland has this harsh contributory negligence law that can significantly impact case valuation. Under this rule, if you contributed at all to your own injury, you may be barred from recovering damages completely. It's different from most states. In fact, we're only one of 3 states which has this. In those states, they allow partial recovery even if you were partially at fault. Common scenarios where contributory negligence might apply include provoking the dog, trespassing on a property, or ignoring obvious warning signs about the dog's dangerous tendencies. However, the law provides some protection for children under even those circumstances, recognizing that very young children do not appreciate the danger posed by an aggressive dog, and they cannot be held contributory negligent. The threat of a contributory negligence defense can significantly impact settlement negotiations. Insurance companies often raise these defenses to reduce their exposure, even when they don't apply, even in cases where the victim's conduct was minimal or really not negligent at all. Those are insurance company tricks. This is why having experienced legal representation is critical in Maryland dog bite cases. Calculating pain and suffering damages is important as early as you can in the case, but obviously those things become more obvious later on. Pain and suffering damages are often the largest component of a dog bite settlement, but they're also the most subjective. There's no formula that courts use or juries use to calculate these damages, which means the value depends heavily on how effectively we can present your case. The severity and duration of your pain play obvious roles in this calculation. Injuries requiring multiple surgeries, extensive physical therapy, long-term medication, psychological treatment typically result in higher pain and suffering awards. The impact on your daily activities is really important. If you can no longer participate in hobbies, sports, or social activities that you previously enjoyed, this affects the value of your case. Psychological impact is increasingly recognized as a significant factor as well. Many dog bite victims develop lasting fears or anxiety disorders that require treatment and affect their quality of life. These psychological injuries are just as real as physical injuries and deserve compensation, and they will be compensated in these cases. The permanency of your injuries significantly affects pain and suffering as well. Temporary injuries that heal completely generate lower awards and settlement offers than permanent disabilities or permanent disfigurement. This is why it's critical to wait until you reach what's called maximum medical improvement before settling a case. Understanding the settlement process and the timeline for how a case will go helps to set realistic expectations for both timing and value. Most dog bite cases settle out of court, typically within 6 months to a year of the incident. The timeline depends on a bunch of factors, including the severity of the injuries, the complexity of the case, and of course the insurance company's willingness to negotiate fairly. The first step is usually submitting a demand letter to the insurance company once you have received maximum medical improvement and we have obtained all of your medical records and bills. This letter outlines your injuries, treatment, financial loss, like lost wages, and of course, our assessment of pain and suffering. It includes supporting documentation like your medical records, your medical bills, wage statements, photographs of the injuries. Maybe from time to time, we'll send in an expert report to substantiate our damages at the onset. The insurance company typically responds with an initial offer if they understand their liability in the matter. Their first offer is usually pretty low and significantly lower than what we demand. This begins the negotiation process, which can involve multiple rounds of offers and counteroffers. Having experienced legal representation during this process is critical because insurance adjusters are skilled negotiators who work to minimize their company's exposure. That's their job. If settlement negotiations fail, filing a lawsuit may be necessary, and it's important for the insurance company to understand we are more than willing to file that lawsuit and pursue a case if the negotiations don't go the way we think they should. In Maryland, you have 3 years from the date of the dog bite to file a lawsuit. But waiting too long can weaken your case as memories fade and evidence becomes harder to gather. Scars don't look as bad as they did years after the incident. So when do you consider litigation? While most dog bite cases settle out of court, sometimes litigation is necessary. This typically happens when the insurance company refuses to make a reasonable settlement offer or disputes liability despite clear evidence of the owner's responsibility. Litigation can increase the potential value of your case as well because it demonstrates your commitment to pursuing full compensation. Insurance companies often increase their settlement offers as soon as a lawsuit is filed, particularly if they believe that you have a strong case and experienced legal representation. However, litigation also involves additional costs and risks. The process takes longer, requires more extensive preparation, and there's always the possibility that a jury might award less than what the insurance company was offering in the first place. The decision to litigate should be made very carefully, considering both the potential benefits and the risks, but understand that is your decision as the victim. The importance of documentation. Proper documentation is crucial for maximizing the value of your dog bite case. This starts immediately after the incident and continues throughout your treatment and recovery. Photographs of your injuries, particularly taken immediately after the bite and at regular intervals during the healing process, provide powerful evidence of your damages. Medical records are obviously essential, but it's also important to document how your injuries are affecting your daily life. I always advise my clients to keep a journal of pain levels, limitations on daily life, things that they can't do that they used to do, and the emotional state that they find themselves in throughout the day, throughout different days, and so on. Those things can provide valuable evidence for pain and suffering damages. If you're unable to participate in activities you previously enjoyed, document those limitations. Employment records showing missed work days and reduced earning capacity are critical for calculating lost wages. If your injuries affect your ability to perform your job duties, getting a written assessment from your employer or supervisor will be a very valuable piece of evidence. So moving forward with your case. After handling literally thousands of dog bite cases over the years, I can tell you that the value of your case depends on many factors working together. The severity of your injuries, the impact on your life, the available insurance coverage, and the strength of your legal representation all play critical roles in determining your ultimate compensation. What you've learned today gives you the foundation to understand how these cases are valued, what factors might apply to your specific situation. You now know that dog bite cases can be worth far more than just the medical bills. That's important to understand. That Maryland's laws provide strong protection for bite victims, although the law is incredibly complex in our state. And that proper documentation and legal representation can significantly impact your recovery. But knowing how cases are valued is just the beginning. What you do immediately after a dog bite can make or break your case, regardless of its potential value. The steps you take in those first crucial hours and days can determine whether you receive fair compensation or whether valuable evidence is lost forever. That's exactly what I'm covering in my next video. What to do immediately after a dog bite in Maryland. I'll walk you through the specific actions you must take to protect your rights and preserve your case, including critical mistakes that could cost you thousands of dollars in compensation. This isn't theoretical advice. These are the exact steps I tell my own clients to take, and they can make the difference between a successful case and a lost opportunity. If you've been bitten by a dog, watching that video along with this one could be the most important 15 minutes you have spent protecting your rights and your future. Don't wait. Your case value depends on taking the right actions quickly. See you there.